The ammonia smell hit first, sharp, clinical, the kind that crawls into your sinuses and sets up camp. Then came the beeping. That rhythmic, mechanical heartbeat that meant someone was still tethered to this world, however tenuously. I opened my eyes to fluorescent lights that burned white and merciless. My tongue tasted like copper and old pennies. My throat felt raw, scraped hollow. When I tried to lift my hand, an IV tugged at the crook of my elbow, and I watched, detached, distant, as my fingers twitched against starched hospital sheets. A nurse materialized beside me, her scrubs patterned with cartoon hedgehogs. She had kind eyes, the corners creased with the sort of compassion that comes from witnessing too much suffering. "Easy," she murmured, her hand cool against my wrist. "You're okay. You're at Mercy General. You've been in an accident." An accident. The word felt wrong, like a shoe on the opposite foot. My mind reached for the memory and found instead a chasm. Dark, vast, and utterly terrifying. I tried to speak, but only a wheeze escaped. "Don't try to talk yet," she said, adjusting something on the IV stand. "Your family's in the waiting room. Should I get them?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure why. The motion made my head swim, sent the room tilting on an axis I couldn't quite perceive. Through the window I could see snow falling in fat, lazy flakes. December then? Or maybe January? How long? The nurse disappeared, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking against linoleum. I closed my eyes and tried to remember anything. My name, my age, how I'd ended up here. But there was only that terrible emptiness, broken occasionally by flashes of something I couldn't quite grasp. A woman's voice, the smell of burnt sugar, a fountain pen scratching across expensive paper, footsteps in the hallway, multiple sets, moving quickly. The door burst open and a woman rushed in, mid-40s, immaculately dressed despite the late hour, her hair in a perfect chignon that must have taken 30 minutes to achieve. Behind her came a man in a cashmere coat, his face drawn and pale, and a younger woman clutching a designer handbag like a shield. "Lily!" The older woman's voice cracked. Oh, thank God, Lily! The name settled over me like an ill-fitting coat. I searched for recognition and found only more emptiness. The woman, my mother presumably, gripped my hand with fingers that trembled, her perfume overwhelming the hospital's chemical scent. Chanel No. 5. Why, the classic kind that wealthy women wore to charity galas and board meetings. "Mom," I croaked, testing the word. It felt foreign on my tongue, but her face crumpled with relief. "We thought..." She pressed a hand to her mouth, unable to finish. The man, my father, stood at the foot of the bed, his jaw working as if he were chewing words too difficult to speak. The younger woman, maybe early 20s, hung back near the door. She wore her wealth casually, a Hermes scarf knotted at her throat, diamond studs that caught the fluorescent light. "I told you that car was too fast for her," she said, her voice sharp with an emotion I couldn't name. "I told you, Daddy." My father's eyes met mine then, and something passed between us, some current of understanding or fear, I couldn't tell which. "Charlotte," he said quietly. A warning in the single word. Charlotte, my sister then. She looked away first, picking at her manicured nails. "The doctor said you might have some memory issues," my mother continued, smoothing my hair back from my forehead with a gesture that felt practiced, performative. "It's normal after a head injury. Everything will come back, sweetheart. You just need to rest." But even as she spoke, I felt it. That first crack in the dam, not a memory exactly, more like the ghost of one, a palimpsest beneath the blankness. I knew this room. Not this room specifically, but the architecture of this moment. The way my mother's hand felt against my skin, the particular shade of contempt in Charlotte's eyes. I've been here before. The thought arrived fully formed, absolute, and terrifying. I gripped my mother's hand tighter, and she mistook my fear for need, her face softening. "It's okay, baby. We're here. We're all here." They stayed for another hour, filling the silence with reassurances and small talk that felt scripted, rehearsed. Charlotte scrolled through her phone, occasionally glancing up with that same peculiar expression. Not quite worry, not quite satisfaction. My father made calls in the hallway, his voice a low rumble through the walls. My mother narrated my life back to me in careful, measured phrases. I was 28. I worked in PR for the family's foundation. I'd crashed my Mercedes on black ice coming back from a charity event in the Hamptons. With each detail, I felt the walls of my identity closing in, but nothing sparked recognition. It was like listening to someone describe a stranger's life, clinical and distant. Until she mentioned Marcus. "He's been here every day," my mother said, her voice taking on that particular tone mothers use when discussing their daughter's romantic prospects. "He wanted to be here when you woke up, but visiting hours..." She trailed off, checking her watch. A vintage Cartier that probably cost more than most people's cars. "He'll come by tomorrow. He's been so worried." Marcus. The name detonated something in my chest. Not recognition, but its opposite. A violent, visceral rejection that made my heart rate spike enough to set off the monitor. The nurse who'd been checking my vitals looked up sharply. "Lily?" My mother's voice, concerned now. "What is it? What's wrong?" But I couldn't answer, because suddenly I was somewhere else. Someone else. Smelling burnt sugar and ink. Feeling the weight of a fountain pen in my hand, watching my own elegant cursive spell out words I didn't want to write. "Thank you so much for celebrating with us. Marcus and I are truly blessed." The vision fractured, dissolved. I was back in the hospital bed, my mother's face hovering over mine, but something had shifted. The blankness was receding, replaced by an impossible certainty that felt like drowning in reverse, water rushing out of my lungs, filling me with air I hadn't known I'd been missing. "I need to see him," I heard myself say. My mother smiled, relieved. "Of course, sweetheart. Tomorrow?" "No." My voice came out stronger now, cutting through her platitudes. "I need to see Marcus. Tonight. Right now." The three of them exchanged looks. My father's wary, Charlotte's calculating, my mother's confused. "It's almost midnight," she said gently. "He's probably asleep, and the doctor said you need to rest." "Call him." I wasn't asking. Something in my tone made my father move to the window, his phone already in his hand. He spoke in low tones, and I caught fragments. "Awake, insisting. Yes, I know the time." 10 minutes later, footsteps approached the door. Different footsteps, confident, measured, the particular cadence of expensive Italian leather against hospital linoleum. Marcus Ashford entered my hospital room like he entered everywhere else, as if he owned it. He was classically handsome in that way that comes from generations of genetic curation and expensive orthodontics. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of jawline that made fashion photographers weep. His hair was artfully disheveled, probably styled by someone who charged $300 for the privilege. He wore a Tom Ford suit despite the hour, because men like Marcus Ashford were always camera-ready. Our eyes met. And I remembered. Not everything, not yet, but enough. Enough to know that I'd worn his engagement ring for 6 months in another life. Enough to know that I'd written 300 thank you notes in my elegant, practiced hand, each one a lie-bound in cream-colored cardstock. Enough to know that I'd walked down an aisle toward this man while my soul screamed in protest. Enough to know that he'd killed me. Not with his hands. Marcus would never be so crude. But his negligence, his ego, his absolute certainty that the rules didn't apply to people like us. That had been the weapon. A late-night drive in icy conditions because he'd insisted on attending one more party, one more event where he could be seen with his beautiful, compliant fiancée. His hand on my thigh as he drove too fast, his attention on his phone instead of the road, the tree that materialized out of nowhere, the sound of metal crumpling, glass shattering, the darkness that swallowed everything. "Lily?" His voice was silk over steel. He crossed the room in 3 strides, reaching for my hand, but I pulled back before he could touch me. The hurt that flashed across his face was so perfectly calibrated that I almost believed it was real. "You're here," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Of course I'm here." He settled into the chair my mother had vacated, angling his body toward me with the kind of calculated openness that read as vulnerability to people who didn't know better. "God, Lily, when your father called about the accident, I thought I'd lost you." "You did," I wanted to say. "You did lose me. You lost me when you put your ambition ahead of my safety. You lost me when you treated me like an accessory to your perfect life." But I was 28 years old, lying in a hospital bed, and according to the calendar on the wall, it was December 18th. If the patterns held, and they would, they always did, Then I had exactly 4 months before Marcus would propose to me at his parents' estate in the Berkshires. 4 months before I'd say yes, because that's what good daughters did, what successful women in our circle did. 4 months before I began the slow slide toward that dark road, that impossible tree, that final darkness. Unless I changed it. I need to tell you something, I said. Marcus leaned forward, his expression arranged into concerned attentiveness. Behind him, my family watched with varying degrees of interest. My mother looked pleased that I was engaging with him. My father looked tired. Charlotte looked suspicious. The accident, I continued, choosing my words carefully. I don't remember it, but I remember other things. Memory can be tricky after trauma, Marcus said smoothly. The doctors explained that you might experience some confusion. I'm not confused. I met his eyes directly, and something in my gaze made him pause. I'm clear, clearer than I've ever been. Lily, we're not getting back together. The words hung in the air like smoke. My mother made a small sound of distress, while my father's expression went carefully blank. Charlotte's eyes widened with something that might have been satisfaction. Marcus's face cycled through shock, confusion, and finally settled on a kind of patronizing concern. Sweetheart, we're not together. We broke up 3 weeks ago. Don't you remember? 3 weeks ago. The revelation hit me like cold water. I frantically searched the fragments of returning memory and found it. The fight. The terrible, screaming fight in his penthouse apartment. Me finally finding the courage to end things. Him destroying that courage with systematic precision, pointing out all the ways I was overreacting, being dramatic, throwing away our future over nothing. We'd broken up. And then I'd gotten in my car, not his, and driven toward the Hamptons for a charity event I'd been obligated to attend. And the road had been icy and I'd been crying, and not his fault. Not this time. The realization should have been freeing, but instead it felt like vertigo. If he hadn't killed me, then what was I doing here? Why was I back in this moment, this life, this body that felt simultaneously foreign and intimately familiar? I'm sorry, I said automatically, the apology rising from some deep well of conditioning. I thought, it's okay. Marcus's hand found mine before I could pull away again. His thumb traced circles on my wrist, a gesture I'd once found comforting and now made my skin crawl. The head injury, it's affecting your memory, but we'll get through this. I'm here for you, Lily. I'll always be here for you. The thing was, he believed it. That was the terrifying part. Marcus Ashford genuinely thought he was a good man. A devoted, almost ex-boyfriend. Someone worthy of admiration and trust. The fact that his devotion was really obsession. His trust really control. He couldn't see it. Men like Marcus never could. Thank you, I said, pulling my hand free under the guise of adjusting my IV. But I'm tired. I think I need to rest. He stood immediately, ever the gentleman. Of course, I'll come back tomorrow. We can talk then when you're feeling better. He leaned in, and I knew he was going to kiss my forehead, that claiming gesture he always made in front of my family. I turned my head at the last second, so his lips caught only air. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, quickly masked, before he straightened. Rest well, Lily. He left with my family in tow, my mother promising to bring me fresh clothes in the morning. My father squeezing my shoulder in a rare gesture of affection, Charlotte hanging back just long enough to whisper, "That was rude, even for you." Then I was alone with the beeping machines and the smell of antiseptic and the weight of impossible knowledge. I'd lived this life before. I was sure of it now. Not the accident. That had been different, happened at a different time for different reasons, but the shape of this existence, the people, the choices, the slow, suffocating inevitability of becoming someone I hated. The question was, what had I done differently this time to end up here, in this hospital bed, with my memories fractured but intact? I closed my eyes and reached for the answer. It came in pieces, fragments of a life I hadn't lived yet but somehow remembered, the engagement, the wedding planning, the thank you notes. My hand cramping as I wrote the 300th variation of Grateful Platitude. Marcus's mother insisting on personalized responses to every single gift, every single gesture. The foundation of our marriage built on my elegant cursive, thanking strangers for crystal we'd never use and china we'd never touch. And then the accident, the real one. 6 months into our marriage, Marcus driving too fast, too distracted, too certain of his own invincibility. The tree, the darkness, the end. But not quite the end. Waking up. Opening my eyes, the same fluorescent lights, the same ammonia smell, the same impossible, terrifying knowledge that I'd been given a second chance. Finding Charlotte in the waiting room, her eyes red from crying, real crying, the kind that destroyed makeup and left your face blotchy, the kind of crying I'd never seen from my perfect, polished sister. "I'm sorry," she'd sobbed, gripping my hand. "I'm so sorry I was such a bitch to you. I thought I had time to tell you that I actually..." She'd never finished the sentence, but her tears had been real. Her grief had been real. And I'd understood in that moment of clarity that comes from surviving the unsurvivable, that I'd spent my entire life missing what was right in front of me, including the fact that my sister loved me. The memory dissolved, leaving me gasping in the hospital bed. Not a memory of this life, but of the one before, or after, or whatever temporal mechanics governed the impossible thing that had happened to me. I'd died, and I'd come back, and I'd tried to do things differently, but somewhere along the way I'd made a mistake. Changed the wrong thing, saved myself from Marcus only to end up here anyway. Broken and alone, staring at the same ceiling tiles and facing the same impossible choice. Who would I become this time? The nurse returned, adjusting my medications, murmuring something soothing about sleep. The drugs kicked in quickly, pulling me down into darkness that felt too much like dying. I dreamed of fountain pens and burnt sugar, of my own handwriting spelling out lies I'd never tell again. I was released from the hospital 3 days later with a prescription for painkillers I wouldn't take and instructions to follow up with my neurologist in 2 weeks. My mother arrived to collect me in a town car driven by someone named Robert, who'd apparently been the family's driver for 15 years. I had no memory of him, but he greeted me with such genuine warmth that I felt the absence of recognition like a physical ache. The city looked different through the car's tinted windows. Or maybe I looked at it differently. Either way, every street corner felt like a déjà vu. Every building a ghost of somewhere I'd been or would be or had already experienced in some other configuration of reality. We pulled up to a brownstone in the West Village that apparently belonged to me. My mother chatted pleasantly about nothing, the weather, the traffic, an upcoming gala for the foundation, while I stared at the limestone facade and tried to remember living there. "I had Mrs. Chin stock your refrigerator," she was saying as Robert opened my door. "And I've arranged for a home care nurse to check on you daily. Just for the first week." "That's not necessary." I climbed out carefully, my ribs still tender where the seatbelt had caught. "I'm fine, Mom." "You were in a serious accident, Lily. You need to take care of yourself." "I died," I wanted to say. "I died and came back. And I'm standing here in a life I don't remember living, but somehow know intimately. And I don't need a nurse. I need answers." Instead, I said, "A week then. Just 1 week." She looked relieved, kissed my cheek, and promised to call later. Robert handed me my keys, a Tiffany keychain I definitely didn't remember buying, and waited until I was inside before pulling away from the curb. The brownstone smelled like lemon polish and something else, something floral I couldn't quite place. Peonies, maybe. The entryway opened into a living room that looked like it had been designed by someone with impeccable taste and unlimited funds. Cream-colored everything. Touches of gold, abstract art that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. It should have felt like home. Instead, it felt like a museum to a person I didn't recognize. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, my legs shaking with exhaustion. The master bedroom was exactly what I expected. Minimalist, elegant, utterly impersonal. The closet held rows of designer clothes in muted neutrals, shoes organized by color and season. The bathroom was stocked with La Mer products and French pharmacy brands. I caught sight of myself in the mirror and stopped. The woman staring back at me was beautiful. Not in a flashy way. My mother would never allow that, but with the kind of refined, cultivated beauty that came from good genes and better resources. Chestnut hair cut in a precision bob. High cheekbones, green eyes that looked haunted despite the perfect bone structure surrounding them. I looked exactly like I remembered. Exactly like the woman who'd married Marcus Ashford and died 6 months later. Except for the scar. A thin line ran along my hairline, barely visible, probably from the accident. I traced it with one finger and felt memory stir. Stitches dissolving. A plastic surgeon my father had insisted on. Charlotte visiting and making a joke about Harry Potter that had actually been funny. Charlotte. The thought of my sister brought a pang of something complicated. Grief mixed with hope, mixed with an emotion I couldn't quite name. In my other life, my other death, she'd cried real tears. She'd shown real emotion. And I'd been too busy dying to tell her that I'd seen it, that I'd understood. I needed to see her, to test this impossible theory taking shape in my mind, to understand what was the same and what was different, and where the two timelines had diverged. But first, I needed to remember everything I could about that other life, the one where I'd married Marcus and died and come back changed. I found a notebook in my desk, moleskin, expensive, mostly empty, and sat down to write. But the moment I picked up a pen, my hand froze. My handwriting, I stared at the blank page, at my fingers gripping the pen, and felt that terrible certainty again. This was important. This mattered, the way I formed letters, the specific slant of my script. The pressure I applied to the paper, it all meant something. I started with my name, Lily Catherine Thornton. The letters flowed easily, muscle memory taking over. Elegant loops, careful spacing, the kind of penmanship that came from expensive private schools and years of practice. The exact same handwriting I'd used to write 300 thank you notes to Marcus's family and friends. The exact same handwriting that, according to memories that shouldn't exist, I'd allowed Charlotte to use. The fragment hit me like lightning. Charlotte at my kitchen table, stacks of cream-colored note cards spread before her, my fountain pen in her hand. "I can't do this," she'd said, her voice cracking. "I can't pretend to be you. What if someone notices?" "No one will notice," I'd assured her. "We have the same handwriting. Mom made sure of that, remember? To all those penmanship lessons. That was 20 years ago. Muscle memory doesn't forget." And she'd bent over the cards, her hand shaking slightly, forming words in my script. "Thank you for the beautiful vase. Marcus and I will treasure it always." But why? Why would I have let her do that? Why would she have agreed? I set the pen down and pressed my palms against my eyes. The memories were there, tantalizingly close, but fractured, like looking at a complete picture through broken glass. My phone buzzed, a sleek iPhone in a Hermes case, and I almost ignored it, but the name on the screen made me pick it up. "Charlotte? Hello?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "So you're not dead." Charlotte's voice, sharp as always, but with an undercurrent of something else. Relief? Mother called. "We said you'd been released. Very much alive." "Good, because we need to talk." "About?" A pause. "You really don't remember, do you? The accident scrambled more than your ability to drive." "I remember enough." A lie, but I needed her to keep talking. "Then you remember what you promised me." Her voice dropped lower, urgent. "Lily, if you've changed your mind, you need to tell me now, before it's too late." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I haven't changed my mind." "You swear?" "I swear." I had no idea what I was swearing to, but the desperation in Charlotte's voice made the lie feel necessary. She exhaled, a sound like wind through leaves. Okay. I'll be there in an hour. Don't talk to anyone until I arrive. Not Marcus, not Mom, not anyone." The line went dead. I sat in my expensive bedroom in my expensive brownstone, so holding my expensive phone and tried to piece together what I'd just committed to, but all I had were fragments. Charlotte's tears, my handwriting, a promise made in another life that somehow carried over to this one. The doorbell rang exactly 53 minutes later. Charlotte burst in without waiting for an invitation, designer boots tracking melted snow across my hardwood floors. She looked simultaneously polished and disheveled. Hair perfect, makeup flawless, but her eyes wild with an emotion I'd rarely seen from her. Fear. "Show me your hands," she demanded. I held them out, confused. She grabbed my right hand, turning it palm up, examining my fingers like she was looking for evidence of something. Her own hands were shaking. "You had an IV." "Where?" I pointed to the crook of my elbow where a bruise was fading to yellow. She pulled up my sleeve, studied the mark, then released me abruptly. "Jesus, I thought—" She ran a hand through her hair, destroying its perfect arrangement. "I thought maybe you were lying, that you were actually him." "Him who?" "Marcus!" She practically shouted it. Marcus, who somehow always knows exactly what you're thinking. Marcus, who called me the day after your accident to ask if you'd mentioned anything about breaking your engagement. Marcus, who's been hovering around your hospital room like a fucking vulture waiting for you to wake up so he could... She stopped, her jaw working. You really don't remember? I remember dying, I said quietly. Charlotte went pale. What? Not this time. Another time. A different accident. I remember marrying him and dying, and I gestured helplessly at the room, at my body, at the impossibility of my existence. Coming back! My sister stared at me for a long moment, then slowly she sank onto my couch, her head in her hands. Fuck, she whispered. Fuck, I thought I was the only one. The room tilted. What did you say? Charlotte looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I died too, Lily. 6 months after your wedding, overdose, Mom found me in my apartment with an empty bottle of pills and a note I don't even remember writing. She laughed, a broken sound. And then I woke up, 3 years earlier, in my old bedroom at the estate, and I thought I'd gone crazy until I realized I could remember things that hadn't happened yet. Your engagement, your wedding, her voice cracked, your death. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Could only stare at my sister and process the impossible truth. I wasn't alone. When did you figure it out? Charlotte asked. That you'd come back. The hospital, when Mom mentioned Marcus, everything just flooded back. For me, it was seeing you. She wiped at her eyes, mascara smudging. You walked into Sunday brunch at the estate, and you looked exactly like you did at your funeral. And I knew I'd been given a second chance to save you. Save me from what? From him, from yourself, from the life Mom had planned for you. She stood, started pacing. I tried everything, Lily. I warned you about Marcus. I told you he was controlling. I sabotaged your dates. I even told Mom I thought he was wrong for you, which got me effectively exiled from the family for 3 months. But you wouldn't listen. You never listened. Because I didn't know, I said. I didn't remember dying. This is the first time I stopped. Wait, you said you warned me. When? A year ago. Maybe more. Time gets weird when you're trying to change the future. She turned to face me. I told you everything. About my overdose, about your accident, about waking up 3 years in the past, and you thought I'd lost my mind. You wanted me to see a psychiatrist. I closed my eyes, searching for the memory. It was there, buried under layers of impossible returned knowledge. Charlotte, wild-eyed and desperate, telling me an insane story about time travel and death and second chances. Me, rational and concerned, suggesting therapy, the fight that had followed, vicious and painful. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be. I wouldn't have believed me either. She sat back down, close enough that our knees almost touched. But then something changed. About 3 months ago, you called me in the middle of the night and said 3 words. I believe you. What made me believe? You never said. But the next day you broke up with Marcus, told him you needed space to figure out what you really wanted. And when he tried to pressure you back together, you stood firm. For the first time in your entire fucking life, Lily, you stood up for yourself. The memory was there, but distant, like watching myself in a film. And then you crashed your car. Marcus called me from the hospital, crying, actually crying, saying it was his fault, that he'd pushed you too hard, that he'd never forgive himself if you didn't wake up. Charlotte's expression hardened. Though he was already crafting the narrative, the devoted boyfriend devastated by his girlfriend's tragic accident, the hero who'd stand by your bedside until you recovered. But I did recover. You did. And when you woke up, you didn't remember any of it. Not your death, not my death, not the conversation we had where you finally believed me. She leaned forward, but you remembered one thing. The promise. What promise? Charlotte pulled out her phone, scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward me. It was a photograph of a cream-colored note card, my elegant handwriting visible even through the digital rendering. Dear Aunt Patricia, thank you so much for the beautiful serving platter. Marcus and I are truly grateful for your generosity and support. We look forward to creating many happy memories in our new home together. With love, Lily and Marcus. But beneath the photograph, in Charlotte's sharper, more angular typing, this was written 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks before your accident. 1 week after you'd broken up with Marcus for the final time. I don't understand. Look at the date on the card. She zoomed in on the photograph, and I could see it now. The small printed date in the corner. April 23rd. 4 months in the future. You told me, Charlotte said quietly, that in your original timeline, you'd gotten back together with Marcus in January, that he'd proposed in April, that you'd spent months writing thank you notes for engagement gifts, and then wedding gifts, and then... She stopped. You told me you were haunted by your own handwriting, so that every elegant loop felt like a prison you'd built letter by letter. My hand found the pen I'd set down earlier, gripped it tight enough to hurt. I let you use my handwriting. You taught me, she corrected, spent hours drilling me on the specific slant, the pressure points, the way you crossed your T's, made me practice until even I couldn't tell the difference. She took the phone back, tucked it away. You said if Marcus proposed again, when he proposed again, you'd need me to write the thank you notes, because you couldn't do it, couldn't contribute to the lie. But why would you? Because you saved my life, Lily. Charlotte's voice broke. In my original timeline, you died, and I took those pills because I couldn't live with the guilt of how I'd treated you, how jealous I'd been, how cruel. I got a second chance, and I used it to try to save you. But you got a second chance too, and you used it to save both of us. I thought of my sister at my funeral, her tears real and raw. I thought of her desperate attempts to warn me. I thought of the bond we could have had, should have had, if pride and jealousy and our mother's careful cultivation of rivalry hadn't kept us apart. I don't remember teaching you, I admitted. I don't remember any of it. Then I'll show you. Charlotte stood, pulled me to my feet. Come on, we have work to do. What work? She smiled then, and it transformed her face into something I'd never seen before. Hope. You made me promise that if you forgot, I'd remind you. Well, that I'd help you finish what you started, which is making sure Marcus Ashford never gets close enough to hurt you again. Charlotte's apartment was everything mine wasn't. Lived in, chaotic, real. Books stacked on every surface, art supplies scattered across the dining table, a half-dead succulent clinging to life on the windowsill. She cleared space on her couch by shoving a pile of fashion magazines onto the floor and gestured for me to sit. Coffee? She asked, already heading to her kitchen. Please. While she banged around making espresso, in a machine that looked older than both of us combined, I examined the photographs on her walls. Charlotte through the years. At boarding school, at gallery openings, at family events where her smile never quite reached her eyes. And then, tucked in the corner, one I didn't expect, the two of us, maybe 16 and 19, arms slung around each other, genuinely laughing. I couldn't remember when it had been taken. Mom's 60th, Charlotte said from behind me, 2 cups in hand, before everything went to shit between us. What happened? She handed me the coffee and settled onto the couch. You got into Yale? I didn't. Mom made it very clear which daughter she was proud of. She took a sip, winced at the heat. I made it my mission to outshine you after that. Dated the right guys, said the right things, threw the right parties, and you just let me. Never competed. Never fought back. It made me hate you more. And now? Now I know better. She set her cup down, pulled out her phone again. Now I understand that Mom's manipulation was the real enemy, not you. Never you. She scrolled through her photos until she found what she was looking for, a series of images showing note cards covered in handwriting. My handwriting, I thought at first, but then Charlotte held up her right hand, and I could see the slight callus on her middle finger, the ink stains that hadn't quite washed out. I've been practicing, she said. Every day since you taught me, different papers, different pens, different emotional states. You said handwriting can change based on mood, so I needed to be able to replicate yours under any condition. I stared at the samples, my throat tight. The resemblance was uncanny. If I hadn't known better, I would have sworn I'd written them myself. This is extensive. You made me promise to take it seriously. She pulled out a leather-bound journal. I flipped it open to reveal pages of notes in my handwriting. Or her approximation of it. You said there was a science to it, that forensic handwriting experts can identify individual characteristics that are almost impossible to fake. But you also said that siblings raised in the same environment, taught by the same teachers, often develop similar writing patterns naturally. We had the same penmanship instructor, I said, the memory surfacing. Mrs. Harrison? She was obsessed with the Palmer method. Exactly, which gave us a foundation. But you needed me to go deeper, to match not just the letter forms, but the rhythm, the pressure, the unconscious habits. She traced a lowercase g with her finger. See how you always make the descender slightly shorter than it should be? And how your capital T has that little hook at the top? Oh, those are tells. Unique markers that would trip up most forgers. But not you. Not me, she agreed. Because I spent 3 months doing nothing but studying your handwriting, analyzing samples from years ago, tracking how it's changed over time, understanding the biomechanics of how you hold a pen. She looked up, met my eyes. You were very specific about what you needed from me. A chill ran down my spine. What exactly did I need? Charlotte closed the journal carefully, as if it contained something precious or dangerous or both. You said Marcus would propose again, that he'd never accept the breakup, never truly let you go, that he'd wait for the right moment, when you were vulnerable, uncertain, and he'd swoop in with the perfect gesture, the perfect words. And when I said yes, when you said yes, there would be an engagement party, gifts, expectations. She stood, started pacing. You told me about the 300 thank you notes you'd written in your original timeline. How each one felt like signing away a piece of yourself. How by the time you finished them, you'd forgotten how to say no. I thought of my hand cramping around a pen, the endless stack of cream-colored cards, the lies that became true through sheer repetition. So I asked you to write them for me. To write them as you, Charlotte corrected. The notes would still come from you, still bear your signature, still maintain the appearance of perfect gratitude. But the actual labor, the soul-crushing work of constructing that prison, that would be mine. Why would you agree to that? She stopped pacing, turned to face me. Because you said it was the only way. That if you had to write those notes yourself, you'd start to believe them. Start to convince yourself that the engagement was real, the marriage was inevitable, the death was... Her voice caught. You said you needed someone to carry that burden. Someone who could maintain the facade while you figured out how to escape. The logic was sound, in a twisted way. I'd lived through the experience of writing myself into a cage. I knew how insidious it was, how the repeated act of thanking people for celebrating a union you didn't want could gradually convince you that maybe you did want it, or at least that you should want it. But there's a risk, I said slowly. If anyone noticed the difference in handwriting, that's where it gets interesting. Charlotte's eyes lit up with something that looked like excitement. You said we could use it. Yeah, make it part of the plan. I don't understand. She pulled out her phone again, opened to a different photo. This one showed 2 note cards side by side, almost identical except for the minutest differences in letter spacing, pressure variation. You said that forensic handwriting analysis isn't just about identifying someone, it's about establishing patterns, timelines, evidence. My mind raced ahead, seeing the shape of it. If someone compared the notes, they'd see inconsistencies, small ones, barely noticeable to the casual observer, but to an expert, she smiled. To an expert, it would look like the notes had been written by 2 different people across a span of time, or under duress, or under someone else's influence, I finished. Charlotte nodded. You said Marcus would never let you go quietly, that when you finally left him, really left him, he'd fight. Use every resource at his disposal, turn it into a legal battle. The notes would be evidence. Evidence that could cut both ways. Yes, they'd show you'd accepted his proposal, gone through with the engagement, but they'd also show something was off, that your handwriting had changed, that maybe you'd been coerced, manipulated. I stood, started my own pacing. The pieces were coming together now, forming a picture I should have remembered but didn't. I was building a paper trail. You were building an escape route, Charlotte corrected, a way to prove that you weren't in your right mind when you agreed to marry him, that the engagement was suspect from the start. But that would only work if... I stopped. If someone actually analyzed the handwriting, if there was a reason to examine it that closely, which is where the FBI comes in. The words hung in the air between us. I turned to stare at my sister, trying to process what she'd just said. The FBI. You were very specific about that part. Charlotte pulled out a different notebook, this one her own, filled with her natural handwriting. You said that Marcus's family has connections to some questionable business dealings. Nothing concrete, nothing that's been proven, but enough smoke to suggest fire. And you said that if those dealings ever came to light, if the FBI ever started investigating the Ashford family finances, they'd examine everything. I breathed, including thank you notes from family events. Especially thank you notes from family events. Because the Ashfords have a habit of laundering money through charitable donations, and those donations often come with gift receipts, documentation, handwritten acknowledgments. My legs felt weak. I sat back down. Jesus Christ, how deep does this go? Charlotte flipped through her notebook, found a specific page. In your original timeline, you married Marcus in June. By November, you were pregnant. By December, you were dead. She looked up. In my original timeline, I overdosed in January, 2 months after your death. Which means I missed something important. What? The FBI raid on the Ashford estate happened in March. 3 months after I died? 4 months after you died. Her finger tapped the date she'd written. I only know about it because after I came back, I started monitoring news about the Ashford family. Obsessively, looking for patterns, for warning signs, and I found articles from the future that somehow got published early, or leaked, or time is weird when you're trying to track it. She pulled up her phone again, showed me a screenshot of a news article dated March 15th. 4 months from now. The headline read, Ashford family under investigation for wire fraud and money laundering. This hasn't happened yet, she said, but it will. And when it does, they'll examine every document, every transaction, every piece of correspondence the family has produced in the past 5 years, including thank you notes. Including thank you notes signed by Lily Thornton Ashford. Charlotte's expression was grim. In your original timeline, you wrote those notes yourself. Your handwriting was consistent, unquestionable. When the FBI asked you about them during the investigation, you confirmed they were yours. And when they asked if you'd been aware of your husband's illegal activities, I said no, because I wasn't. The memory wasn't there, but the logic was clear. I was the perfect, innocent wife. You were the perfect scapegoat, Charlotte corrected. Marcus used your legitimacy, your family's reputation, your handwriting as cover for his transactions. And when everything fell apart, you were the one who ended up... She didn't finish. Didn't need to. I could see it clearly now. The investigation, the pressure, Marcus's charm turning to cruelty as the walls closed in. The late-night drive, the icy road, the convenient accident that left him a grieving widower instead of a man whose wife might testify against him. He killed me, I said flatly. He let you die, Charlotte said. There's a difference. Legally, at least. I thought about the tree, the darkness, the terrible final clarity. So, in this timeline, I decided to fight back, to create evidence that my handwriting had been forged or coerced, or to create reasonable doubt. Charlotte finished. If your handwriting in the thank you notes was inconsistent, if an expert could testify that something was off, then maybe, just maybe, you could claim you hadn't known what you were signing, that Marcus had used you. But I did know, I said. This time, I asked you to write in my hand. I'm complicit in the deception. Are you? Charlotte leaned forward. Or did your twin sister, acting without your knowledge, write notes in your hand to help you during a difficult time? Did she practice your signature until she could replicate it perfectly, then forge thank you notes while you recovered from a traumatic brain injury? The implications crashed over me. You'd take the fall. I'd take the credit, she corrected, for saving you from a predatory relationship, for exposing a criminal enterprise, for being the protective sister who saw through Marcus's facade and acted accordingly. They'd charge you with forgery? Maybe. Probably. She shrugged. But I'm already dead in one timeline. Prison sounds better than an overdose. I stared at my sister, this person I'd spent my life competing with, resenting, misunderstanding, and felt something crack open in my chest. I can't let you do that. You already did. You made me promise. She closed her notebooks, stacked them neatly. You said that if you forgot, if the accident scrambled your memories, I should remind you of the plan, keep you on track, make sure that when Marcus proposed again, and he would propose again, I'd be ready. Ready to forge thank you notes in my handwriting. Ready to create evidence of coercion. Charlotte met my eyes. You told me to be sloppy. Not too sloppy, the notes still needed to pass casual inspection, but sloppy enough that a forensic expert would notice. Inconsistent pressure here, a variation in slant there. The kind of tells that would suggest either two different writers or one writer under significant stress. And when the FBI handwriting expert noticed, you'd have your out. Proof that something had been wrong from the start. That Marcus had manipulated you, used you, possibly even coerced you into actions you wouldn't have taken of your own free will. I stood, walked to her window, looked out at the city lights. Snow was starting to fall again. Fat flakes that caught the glow from street lamps. Somewhere out there, Marcus was planning his next move, waiting for the right moment to slide back into my life. Confident that I'd eventually come around the way I always had, because that was what I'd done in the original timeline. Said yes when I meant no, smiled when I wanted to scream, written 300 thank you notes that built the walls of my own prison. But this time, I had Charlotte. This time, I had a plan I didn't remember making, but could see the brilliance of. This time, I had a chance to turn the weapon Marcus had used against me, my own beautiful, careful, practiced handwriting, into evidence of his crime. Teach me, I said, turning back to my sister. She looked up, confused. Teach you what? How to recognize the differences between your version of my handwriting and mine. If I'm going to pull this off, I need to know what a forensic expert would see. Charlotte smiled slowly. You really don't remember. Remember what? You already know. You spent weeks researching forensic document examination, handwriting analysis, the specific tells that experts look for. You could probably do the analysis yourself at this point. I looked down at my hands, at the callus on my middle finger from years of holding pens, at the ink stains that never quite washed out, at the muscle memory encoded in tendons and bones. Then help me remember, I said. My sister stood, gathered her notebooks, and held out her hand. Let's start with the basics. The difference between a natural variation and a deliberate forgery, between stress-induced changes and intentional deception. I took her hand, felt her grip firm and real and present. And then we wait. For Marcus to make his move. For the proposal we both know is coming. For the moment when your elegant handwriting becomes the evidence that saves your life. We worked through the night. Charlotte spread her materials across her dining table. Journals, practice sheets, photographs of my handwriting from years past. She'd been thorough, almost obsessive. Every note card I'd signed, every birthday message, every grocery list I'd scrawled in the margins of planners she'd somehow acquired, all of it documented, analyzed, cataloged. You gave me access to your apartment before the accident, she explained, catching my expression. Said I'd need baseline samples. Original documents written in your natural hand, under no stress, with no awareness of being observed. I picked up a grocery list dated 3 years earlier. The handwriting was unmistakably mine. The same elegant loops, the same careful spacing, but looser somehow, less controlled. I didn't know I was so consistent. You're not, that's the point. Charlotte pulled out a comparison chart showing how my letter forms changed based on mood, fatigue, the type of pen I used. This is you writing first thing in the morning. She pointed to one sample. And this is you writing late at night after a few glasses of wine. Another sample. Notice the difference? I leaned in, studying the variations. The morning writing was tight, almost rigid. The evening writing showed more flow, gentler curves. The baseline shifts. Exactly. A good forger might replicate your general style, but they'd miss these contextual variations. They'd create something too perfect, too consistent. But you're not trying to be perfect. I'm trying to be you, Charlotte corrected, which means I need to know not just how you write, but when and why and under what circumstances. She flipped to another page, this one showing a series of signatures. Your signature changes depending on whether you're signing a legal document, a credit card receipt, or a greeting card, see? I did. The variations were subtle but present. More flourish on the greeting cards, more precision on the legal documents, more speed on the receipts. This is what you taught me, Charlotte continued. That handwriting isn't just about replicating letter forms, it's about understanding the psychology behind them. The intention, the emotion. She handed me a pen, one of my own apparently, a Mont Blanc I didn't remember owning, and a blank card. Write something. Anything. I thought for a moment, then wrote, "The snow is falling on the city like a forgiveness we don't deserve." Charlotte studied it, pulled out a magnifying glass, examined the pressure points. "You're tense. See how you're bearing down on the downstrokes? And your loops are compressed. You're stressed." I'm processing the fact that I apparently planned an elaborate scheme to entrap my ex-boyfriend using forged handwriting samples and then forgot everything. Fair. She set the magnifying glass down. But that's good. That tension will read as authentic. When you're writing thank you notes for an engagement you don't want, you should be stressed. Except I won't be writing them. You will. I'll be writing them in your hand, under your stress levels, with your emotional state. She picked up her own pen, positioned her hand exactly how I'd positioned mine, and wrote the same sentence. The result was eerie. Not identical, a trained eye could spot differences, but close enough that anyone casually glancing at both samples would assume they came from the same person. "How long did it take you to learn this?" I asked. 3 months of daily practice, 4 to 6 hours a day. She flexed her hand, worked out a cramp. "You were very patient. Oh, it made me do the same exercises over and over until I could replicate your hand in my sleep." I studied her version of my sentence, looking for the tells she'd mentioned. There, the G in falling had a slightly different tail, and the crossbar on the T in city was a fraction higher than mine. Small things, easy to miss unless you were looking. "These differences," I said slowly, "they're intentional." "Some of them. You said to make them subtle enough that they wouldn't be obvious to family or friends, but clear enough that a forensic expert would catch them. The theory being that if the handwriting was perfect, it would actually be more suspicious." I finished her thought, the logic clicking into place. Because no one writes with machine-like precision. Or real handwriting has natural variation. But the variation I'm introducing isn't natural. It's strategic. Charlotte pulled out another chart. This one showing what she called her deviation map, specific places where she'd intentionally differed from my writing. I'm consistent in my inconsistencies, which is its own kind of pattern. And a forensic expert would notice that? Eventually, if they looked hard enough, if they had reason to. She met my eyes, which is where the FBI comes in. I sat back, trying to absorb it all. The plan was elegant in its complexity. Charlotte would write the thank you notes in my hand, but with subtle, traceable differences. To anyone who received them, they'd appear authentic. But to a trained forensic document examiner, the kind the FBI would employ when investigating the Ashford family, they'd raise red flags. Not enough to prove outright forgery. That would implicate Charlotte and potentially me as well. But enough to suggest coercion, stress, possible duress. Enough to make my signatures on those notes less reliable as evidence of willing participation in Marcus's schemes. "There's something I don't understand," I said. "In my original timeline, when did I figure this out? When did I start planning all this?" Charlotte was quiet for a moment. "You said it happened gradually, that you didn't remember dying at first. You just felt off. Like something was wrong, but you couldn't articulate what. And then? Then you had a session with your therapist, Dr. Miranda Chen. You'd been seeing her for anxiety. And during one appointment, you mentioned having incredibly vivid dreams about your own death, about Marcus driving too fast, about the tree." The name sparked recognition. Dr. Chen. I had been seeing her, was still seeing her, presumably, though I'd missed my last few appointments due to the accident. What did she say? She said dreams like that often reflect underlying fears or intuitions we're not ready to consciously acknowledge. She asked what you thought the dreams meant. And I told her I thought Marcus was dangerous. Eventually, it took months of sessions before you were ready to say it out loud, before you were ready to acknowledge that the man you'd agreed to marry was the same man who'd killed you in another life. Charlotte's expression was distant. "You said it was like waking up slowly, like coming out of anesthesia. Each session with Dr. Chen brought more clarity, more memory, until I remembered everything. Until you remembered enough," she corrected. "You said there were still gaps, still things you couldn't access, but you remembered the engagement, the wedding, the investigation, and you remembered dying." I thought about waking up in the hospital, the way the memories had flooded back in fragments. Did I tell Dr. Chen about the rebirth? About coming back? No. You said she'd think you were delusional, that you needed her to believe you were rational, grounded, making good choices based on clear thinking. Charlotte smiled slightly. You learned to translate your experiences into language she could accept. See, instead of, I died and came back, you said, I've had a profound intuitive experience that's shown me my relationship is unhealthy. Semantics. Effective semantics. Dr. Chen helped you develop a safety plan, a way to extricate yourself from Marcus without triggering his controlling behaviors. She also, Charlotte paused, she also helped you understand why you'd stayed with him so long. The family pressure, the socialization, the way you'd been trained from childhood to prioritize appearing perfect over actually being happy. That resonated somewhere deep. I thought of my mother's careful cultivation of my image, the etiquette lessons, the constant emphasis on reputation and propriety, the unspoken understanding that Thornton women didn't make scenes, didn't rebel, didn't choose their own happiness over family expectations. So I broke up with him, I said. Finally got the courage to end things. You did. And he didn't take it well. Showed up at your apartment at 2 a.m, crying and apologizing and promising to change. Called you 100 times a day. Sent flowers to your office. Had his mother call your mother to mediate. Classic escalation pattern. Textbook. Which is when you came to me, Charlotte's voice softened. You told me everything. About the dreams, about the memories, about your fear that if you didn't find a way to permanently extract yourself from Marcus's orbit, you'd end up right back where you started. And you believed me. I believed you because I died too, because I knew exactly what you were talking about, the impossible knowledge, the terrible certainty, the feeling of being trapped in a life you'd already lived and failed. We sat in silence for a moment. Two sisters bound by death and resurrection, planning our survival in a world that didn't know it had already ended once. The thank you notes, I finally said. When did I ask you to write them? About 2 months ago. You said Marcus would propose again, that you could feel it coming, that he was just waiting for you to be vulnerable enough, weak enough to say yes. She pulled out a calendar, showed me a date circled in red. April 23rd. You predicted he'd propose on his birthday, at his family's estate in the Berkshires, in front of everyone so you'd feel too much pressure to say no. And you wanted me to say yes? I wanted you to survive. Charlotte's eyes were fierce. You said the only way to gather evidence against him, to build a case that would hold up under FBI scrutiny, was to go through with the engagement, to let him think he'd won. And while he was basking in his victory, you'd be building your escape route one forged thank you note at a time. The audacity of it took my breath away. That's insane. That's survival. She grabbed my hand. Lily, you spent 6 months married to a man who used you as camouflage for criminal activity, who isolated you from anyone who might help you, who ultimately let you die rather than risk exposure. You came back with the knowledge of what he'd done, and instead of running, you chose to fight. By deliberately entering the same situation that killed me, by taking control of the narrative, by making sure that this time, when it all fell apart, you wouldn't be the scapegoat. You'd be the victim with evidence. I looked at the materials spread across her table. The practiced handwriting samples, the deviation maps, the careful documentation of my letter forms. This was my handwriting, my signature, my elegant cursive weaponized against the man who'd tried to cage me with it. Show me, I said. Show me exactly what differences you introduce. What tells you leave for the FBI to find? Charlotte's smile was sharp. Now you're talking. We worked through the morning, Charlotte walking me through each intentional variation, the way she applied slightly less pressure on upstrokes, creating a telltale difference in pen weight, the way she made my descenders a fraction longer than I naturally did, the way she crossed her T's with a microscopic rightward drift that I never exhibited. The key, she explained, where is consistency in the inconsistency. If I varied randomly, it would just look like natural handwriting variation. But I vary in the same ways, repeatedly, which creates a pattern. A pattern that would look like stress, or coercion, or someone else's hand trying to mimic yours. She showed me a comparison of 20 different samples she'd created, each one with the same set of subtle differences. A forensic expert would call this systematic deviation. It's a red flag that suggests forgery. But not obvious forgery. Not to the casual observer. Your mother could look at these notes and never notice anything wrong. Marcus could sign off on them for the thank you cards, but put them under a microscope, run them through a forensic analysis, and they'd know something was off. They'd know someone was off. Whether that someone was me or you under duress or you being manipulated, that would be for lawyers to argue about. Charlotte gathered the samples carefully. The point is to create reasonable doubt, to make sure that when the FBI comes knocking, you have evidence that things weren't what they seemed. I thought about courtrooms, testimony, expert witnesses. This only works if the FBI actually investigates the Ashfords. They will. The investigation is already in motion. We just haven't caught up to it yet. She pulled out her phone, showed me more screenshots of future news articles. The wire fraud charges stem from a charitable foundation Marcus's father runs. They've been using it to launder money from overseas investors. The FBI has been building a case for 2 years. How do you know this? Because in my original timeline, I obsessively tracked everything Ashford-related after your death. Found articles, court documents, sealed depositions that somehow got leaked. Time travel is weird, Lily. Information bleeds through in strange ways. I studied the articles, the dates that hadn't arrived yet, the certainty of future crimes. So we know they'll be investigated. We know there will be forensic examination of documents. We know you need an exit strategy that doesn't leave you vulnerable to charges of conspiracy. Charlotte met my eyes, which is why you were very specific about one thing. You never asked me to forge your handwriting. You never gave me explicit permission. In fact, if anyone asks, you'll be shocked and betrayed to discover what I did. The implications settled over me like cold water. You want me to throw you under the bus? I want you to survive. If that means I take the fall for helping you, so be it. She squeezed my hand. I already died once from guilt, Lily. I'm not doing it again. This time, I get to be the sister who saved you, even if it costs me. Charlotte, no. Her voice was firm. You don't get to martyr yourself this time. You don't get to sacrifice yourself for some misguided sense of propriety or fairness. You told me, you made me swear that if you forgot the plan, I'd keep you on track. So I'm keeping you on track. I wanted to argue, wanted to find some way to protect my sister from the consequences of a plan I didn't remember making. But looking at her face, seeing the determination there, I understood. This wasn't just about saving me. This was about saving herself, too. Only about making different choices this time around, about refusing to be the person who stood by and let tragedy happen. Okay, I said finally. Okay, so what's the next step? We wait. Marcus will make his move. Probably in the next few weeks. He knows you're vulnerable after the accident, uncertain about your memories. He'll position himself as the stable force in your life, the one person who understands you. And I let him? You let him think he's winning. You're confused, recovering, open to reconciliation. Meanwhile, I'm in the background, practicing your handwriting, preparing for the engagement announcement we both know is coming. And when he proposes, you say yes. You smile. You let your mother plan the engagement party. You accept the gifts. And then you let me write every single thank you note in your beautiful, incriminating hand. I looked at my sister, this person I'd misunderstood for so long, who died and come back and used her second chance to try to save mine, and felt something shift in my chest. I'm sorry, I said. She looked up surprised. For what? For not believing you the first time, for making you fight so hard to save someone who didn't even know she needed saving. Charlotte's eyes went bright with unshed tears. You believe me now. I believe you now. She pulled me into a hug, fierce and sudden. I could feel her trembling. Or maybe that was me. We're going to make it this time, she whispered. Both of us. Both of us, I agreed. We stayed like that for a long moment. Two sisters who died and come back, holding on to each other in a world that didn't know it had already ended once. When we finally pulled apart, Charlotte wiped at her eyes and laughed. Jesus, I'm supposed to be the tough one. You are the tough one. You're the one who's been holding this together while I was forgetting everything. Yeah, well. She gathered her materials, started organizing them back into folders. You can make it up to me by not dying this time. Deal. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it. A text from Marcus. Thinking about you. How are you feeling? Can I bring you dinner? Charlotte read over my shoulder, her expression hardening. It's starting. What should I say? Whatever feels natural. You're confused, recovering, not quite ready to see him, but appreciative of the gesture. She met my eyes. Remember, you're playing a long game now. Every interaction is setting up the final reveal. I typed back, still pretty tired. Maybe in a few days. Thank you for thinking of me. The response came almost immediately. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'm here when you're ready. Charlotte snorted. Translation, I'm circling like a shark, waiting for you to be weak enough to let me back in. Comforting. True, though. She handed me a folder. Take these home, study them. Get familiar with the patterns of deviation, the specific tells. You need to be able to recognize my version of your handwriting on sight. Because when the FBI comes asking questions, you need to look at those thank you notes and genuinely not recognize them as entirely your own work. The confusion needs to be real. I took the folder, felt its weight. Inside were months of my sister's work, hundreds of hours of practice. A forgery so perfect it could pass as real and so flawed it could prove coercion. Charlotte, yeah. If this goes wrong, if we get caught, we won't get caught, because the beauty of the plan is that it's not actually a crime. Not one they can prove, anyway. She smiled. I'm just a concerned sister who helped her traumatized sibling write thank you notes. The fact that my handwriting happens to deviate from yours in systematic ways, that's just an unfortunate side effect of trying to help. You've really thought this through. You thought it through. I'm just remembering for both of us. I left her apartment as dawn was breaking over the city, the folder tucked under my arm like a secret. Snow had stopped falling, leaving the world clean and white and full of dangerous possibility. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. I love you, Lily. That hasn't changed. I stared at the words, feeling nothing but a cold certainty. He did love me in his own twisted way. Loved me the way a collector loves a prized possession. Loved me the way a drowning man loves a life raft. But love without respect was just another form of violence. I deleted the text and headed home to study the ways my sister had learned to write in my voice while making sure everyone would eventually know it wasn't really mine. Marcus waited exactly 2 weeks before making his move. He chose Valentine's Day because he was nothing if not theatrical. He'd sent flowers every day for a week leading up to it. Roses, orchids, peonies, each arrangement more elaborate than the last. My mother called daily to ask if I'd reconsidered giving him another chance. My father said nothing, which was somehow worse than disapproval. Charlotte had coached me through each interaction. Be warm but distant, appreciative but non-committal. You're recovering from a head injury. Confusion is your friend. I'd followed her script perfectly, thanked Marcus for the flowers, mentioned that I was still having memory issues, let him take me to lunch once where I'd been charming and slightly disoriented and utterly uncommitted. He'd eaten it up. Now I stood in my apartment, wearing the dress Charlotte had picked out, Valentino, red silk, the kind of thing that looked effortless but cost more than most people's monthly rent, and waited for Marcus to arrive. You look like you're going to an execution, Charlotte said from my couch, where she'd been pretending to read a magazine for the past hour. Feels like it? Hey. She stood, adjusted the neckline of my dress. You've got this. Just remember, you're saying yes tonight, but you're thinking about the thank you notes, about the evidence, about the moment when all of this becomes the weapon that saves you. No pressure. She smiled. You literally died and came back to life. A marriage proposal should be easy. The doorbell rang. Charlotte squeezed my hand once, then disappeared into my bedroom. We'd agreed she'd stay hidden. Marcus couldn't know she'd been here, couldn't suspect we were working together. As far as he knew, Charlotte and I were still the distant, competitive sisters we'd always been. I opened the door. Marcus stood in the hallway holding the most obscene bouquet of roses I'd ever seen, at least 100 blooms, blood red, their scent overwhelming. He wore a tuxedo because of course he did. Behind him I could see a car waiting at the curb, a driver holding the door open. Lily? His smile was perfect. Practiced. You look stunning. You didn't mention we'd be going out. Well, I wanted to surprise you. He stepped inside, set the roses on my entry table, where they promptly dominated the space, and took my hands in his. I've missed you. The words felt rehearsed. Everything about Marcus felt rehearsed, from his perfectly tousled hair to the exact angle of his jaw. He'd been crafted by expensive schools and exclusive clubs, and the absolute certainty that he deserved everything he wanted. "I've missed you too," I lied. His eyes searched mine. "Have you? You've seemed so distant lately." "I'm still recovering. The accident?" "I know. And I've been patient." Haven't I?" His thumb traced circles on my wrist, that same gesture I'd once found comforting. "But it's been 2 weeks, Lily. 2 weeks of flowers and phone calls and hoping you'd remember how good we were together. Marcus, just come with me tonight. Let me remind you." He pulled me close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and vaguely woody. We had something real. Before the breakup, before the confusion. I know it's still there. I thought about Charlotte in my bedroom, listening to this. About the plan we'd made, about the thank you notes she'd write in me hand. "Okay," I said. "One dinner." His smile widened. "That's my girl." The restaurant was per se because Marcus never did anything by halves. He'd reserved the private dining room. Oh, the one that overlooked Central Park and probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. We were seated at a table set for 2, candles already lit, wine already breathing. "I took the liberty of pre-ordering," he said, pulling out my chair. "The tasting menu, I remembered you loved it last time." I didn't remember a last time, but I smiled and nodded. Let him pour wine I wouldn't drink, let him talk about his work, something to do with his father's foundation, the very foundation that would be under FBI investigation in 2 months, while I pushed food around my plate. He was charming. That was the worst part. Funny and attentive and genuinely interested in my recovery. If I hadn't died at his hands in another timeline, if I hadn't remembered the isolation and control and eventual darkness, I might have been fooled. "Lily," he said during dessert, reaching across the table for my hand, "there's something I need to ask you." Here it comes. These past few weeks without you have been hell. Absolute hell. I know we had problems before. I know I wasn't always the partner you deserved, but the accident, his voice broke, perfectly calibrated. When your father called me, when I thought I might lose you, it put everything in perspective. He stood, moved around the table, and I watched with a strange detachment as he pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "I don't want to waste another second being apart from you. I don't want to risk losing you again." He opened the box, revealing a ring that probably cost more than my car. Princess-cut diamond, platinum setting, understated and elegant, and exactly the kind of thing Marcus would choose. "Lily Catherine Thornton, will you marry me?" I looked at the ring, at his face, arranged in an expression of hopeful vulnerability. At the private dining room that would make saying no feel like a public humiliation. I thought about Charlotte, writing thank you notes in my hand, about the FBI investigation that was coming, about the evidence we were building, one intentional deviation at a time. "Yes," I said, his face transformed with relief and triumph. He slid the ring onto my finger. Perfect fit, because he'd probably measured one of my other rings when we'd been together, and pulled me into a kiss that tasted like expensive wine and victory. "I love you," he breathed against my lips. "I love you so much." "I love you too," I said, and felt the lie settle into my bones. He'd planned everything, of course. Called my parents from the car. They'd been waiting for his signal. My mother cried. My father sounded pleased. Charlotte, when Marcus handed me the phone, managed to sound surprised and happy in a way that would have convinced anyone who didn't know better. "Congratulations, sis," she said, her voice bright. "I can't wait to help you plan the wedding." "Thank you," I said, meeting Marcus's eyes across the car. "That means a lot." We went back to his penthouse. He insisted, wanted to celebrate properly. I made it through an hour of champagne and forced intimacy before claiming exhaustion from the accident. He was understanding, solicitous, the perfect fiancé. "Stay," he said as I called for a car. "Please, I want to wake up with you." "Not yet. I'm still having headaches. Need my own bed, my own space." I touched his face. So I made the gesture look tender. "But soon. I promise." He walked me down to the waiting car, kissed me goodnight with the doorman watching. The ring caught the light from the lobby, sending fractals across the marble floor. I waited until we'd turned the corner before texting Charlotte. "It's done." Her response came immediately. "Engagement party? His mother is already planning it. 2 weeks from now? Perfect. That gives me time." I looked at the ring on my finger, this beautiful cage I'd accepted for the second time. But this time was different. This time, I knew what I was doing. This time, every thank you note would be a nail in Marcus's coffin instead of my own. The car pulled up to my building. I climbed out, rode the elevator up to my apartment, and found Charlotte waiting in my living room. "Let me see it," she said. I held up my hand. She studied the ring with a critical eye. It's gorgeous, tasteful, exactly the kind of thing that would photograph well for the society pages. "Charlotte, how are you?" The question was quiet, serious. "Really?" I sank onto the couch, the weight of the evening crashing down. I said yes to a man I know is going to kill me. "Not this time." She sat beside me. "This time, you're 3 steps ahead of him. This time, you're gathering evidence. This time, I'm going to spend months pretending to be happy while you forge my handwriting on thank you notes and we wait for an FBI investigation that might not even touch me. It will touch you. That's the point." Charlotte grabbed my shoulders, made me look at her. "Marcus used you in the original timeline. Used your reputation, your connections, your legitimacy to cover his crimes. And when it all fell apart, he let you die rather than face consequences. This time, we're making sure that doesn't happen. By deliberately putting myself back in the same situation. By controlling the narrative. By making sure that when it all falls apart, and it will fall apart, you're not the accomplice. You're the victim with documentation." I looked at the ring, this symbol of everything I didn't want. What if I can't do this? What if I can't maintain the facade for months? "Then you lean on me. That's what I'm here for." She squeezed my hand. "You remembered how to die. Now let me teach you how to survive." The engagement party was held at the Ashford estate in the Berkshires, exactly as I'd remembered, or predicted, or lived through before. The house was something out of a Fitzgerald novel. Stone and ivy, sweeping lawns, just a view of mountains that looked like they'd been positioned specifically for maximum impact. Marcus's mother, Patricia Ashford, had planned everything with military precision. 200 guests, mostly family friends and business associates. A string quartet, champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's weekly salaries. And everywhere, the subtle markers of old money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. I wore white, because Patricia had insisted, because engaged women always wore white to their parties, and smiled until my face hurt. Accepted congratulations from people I didn't know. Let Marcus's hand rest possessively on my lower back as we circulated through the crowd. Charlotte had arrived separately, playing her role as the slightly distant but ultimately supportive sister. She wore black, a subtle rebellion that made Patricia's mouth tighten and kept her distance from me in public. But I could feel her watching, waiting. The gifts started arriving immediately, crystal vases and sterling silver frames and monogrammed linens, each one presented with a card, a smile, an expectation of gratitude. I kept a list on my phone, who gave what, their addresses, the specific details that would need to be mentioned in the thank you notes. "This is overwhelming," I murmured to Marcus during a brief moment of privacy. "That's why you have me." He kissed my temple, and my mother's offered to help with the thank you notes. She has someone who handles that sort of thing. Ice ran down my spine. "What?" "Well, there are going to be hundreds of them. Oh, between the engagement gifts and the wedding gifts. It's too much for one person." He smiled, oblivious to my panic. Mother's secretary is very efficient. She could knock them out in a week. "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. I mean, thank you, but no, I want to write them myself. It's more personal. "Lily, you don't have to." "I want to." I softened my tone, placed my hand on his chest in what I hoped looked like affection. "These are our friends and family. I want to thank them properly in my own hand." He studied me for a moment, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Suspicion, calculation, before he smiled. "Of course, whatever you prefer." But that night, after the party wound down and I'd made my excuses to leave early, Patricia cornered me in the hallway. A word. "Lily?" She led me to her study, all dark wood and leather-bound books that had probably never been read, and closed the door behind us. "Marcus tells me you're insisting on writing your own thank you notes." "I am." "That's very admirable." She settled behind her desk, a power move I recognized from my mother's playbook, but impractical. There will be at least 300 notes, possibly more, and you're still recovering from your accident. I'm fine. Are you? She leaned forward, her eyes sharp, because Marcus is concerned. He says you've been having memory issues, confusion, inconsistencies. My heart hammered, but I kept my expression neutral. The doctors say that's normal after a head injury. Of course. Well, which is why it makes sense to let someone else handle the administrative burden of thank you notes. She pulled out a leather folder, opened it to reveal a stack of cream-colored note cards embossed with the Ashford family crest. I've already had these printed. All you'd need to do is sign them. I appreciate the gesture, Patricia, but I'd really prefer to write them myself. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. You're very stubborn, Marcus mentioned that. I prefer determined. Marcus also mentioned that you and your sister have been spending quite a bit of time together lately, after years of barely speaking. She tilted her head. That's an interesting development. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I thought about Charlotte in my apartment, practicing my handwriting, about the deviation maps and the systematic tells, about the plan that depended on no one suspecting what we were doing. The accident gave me perspective, I said carefully, made me realize how important family is. How fortunate! Patricia stood, signaling the conversation was over. Well, I won't insist on the notes, but do let me know if you need any assistance. Marcus is my only son. I have a vested interest in ensuring his happiness. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. I smiled. Of course. Thank you for the party. It was lovely. I left the study with my heart racing, texted Charlotte from the car. Patricia's suspicious. Warned me about spending time with you. The response came quickly. Expected. She's protective of Marcus. Just maintain the facade. She tried to insist on having someone else write the thank you notes. Mo. A longer pause before Charlotte responded. Did you shut it down? Yes, but she's going to be watching. Good. Let her watch. Let her see you writing those notes yourself in your beautiful hand. She'll have no reason to suspect I'm the one actually doing it. I looked out at the Berkshire Mountains, dark against the darkening sky. Somewhere in that estate, Marcus was probably talking to his mother, comparing notes about my behavior. Somewhere in the timeline I'd lived before, I'd already gone through this. The engagement, the wedding, the slow suffocation of a marriage built on control. But this time was different. This time, I had Charlotte. This time, every thank you note would be evidence. This time, I was going to survive. The gifts arrived in an avalanche. Within a week of the engagement party, so my apartment had been transformed into a warehouse of wrapped boxes and ribbons. Crystal, china, silver serving pieces I'd never use, each one accompanied by a card from someone in Marcus's orbit. Business associates, distant relatives, society friends who probably didn't remember my name, but knew the Ashford name carried weight. I photographed each one meticulously, cataloged who sent what, cross-referenced with the guest list Charlotte had obtained. Every detail documented because every detail mattered. This is insane, I said over video call with Charlotte. She was in her apartment, surrounded by her own stacks of materials. I didn't know there were this many ways to give someone a vase. Welcome to high society hell. She held up a sample she'd been working on. How's this one? I studied it through the screen. A thank you note written in my hand, or close enough. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Wellington, thank you so much for the beautiful Waterford decanter. Marcus and I will treasure it always. The handwriting looked perfect to me, but I'd been studying Charlotte's deviation maps, learning to spot the tells. There, the T in beautiful had the crossbar too high, and the M in Marcus showed slightly too much pressure on the downstroke. The tia is off, I said, and watch the pressure on the capitals. Charlotte grinned. Look at you becoming an expert. You're a good teacher. She set the sample aside, pulled out a fresh card. Okay, let's go through today's haul. What came in? I walked her through the list, 12 gifts total, whoa, ranging from a set of monogrammed towels to an obscenely expensive coffee table book about yachts we'd never own. For each one, Charlotte took notes in her own hand, jotting down the key details she'd need to personalize the thank you notes. The Hendersons sent Hermes china, I said. They're old friends of Patricia's. Very conservative. The note should be formal. Got it. What about the Chens? They sent a donation to Marcus's foundation in our names. They're his father's business associates. He mentioned they're currently dealing with some financial issues. So the note should be extra grateful. acknowledging the sacrifice. Charlotte was already making notes. Good. What else? We worked through the list systematically. By the end of the call, Charlotte had everything she needed to begin writing the notes. I'd ship her the actual gifts, or at least the cards, so she could reference them directly while writing. When will you have them done? I asked. End of the week? I'll bring them by Friday. You can look them over. Make sure they're convincing. And sign them. Right, you'll need to add your signature to each one. She paused. Remember, your signature should look natural. Not stressed or careful or overthought. Just your normal everyday signature. As opposed to my abnormal special occasion signature? You joke, but yes, signatures can vary based on context. Forensic experts look for consistency within categories. Formal documents, casual notes, legal paperwork. Your thank you note signature should match your greeting card signature, not your mortgage signature. I picked up one of my old birthday cards to my mother, thus studied my signature at the bottom. She was right. It was slightly different from how I signed legal documents. More flourish, less precision. Got it, I said. Greeting card mode. Perfect. I'll see you Friday. Marcus had taken to showing up unannounced. He'd arrive at my apartment with takeout or flowers, or just the expectation that I'd be happy to see him. I kept my responses calibrated, warm but not enthusiastic, present but not fully engaged, still recovering, still confused, still processing. How are the thank you notes coming? He asked over dinner on Tuesday. We were at my dining table, which I'd had to clear of gifts to make space for the Thai food he'd brought. He'd been talking about the wedding planning. His mother had opinions about everything from the venue to the flowers, and I'd been half listening while mentally composing my next text to Charlotte. Slowly, I said, there are so many. I told you to let Mother help, and I told you I want to do them myself. Something flickered in his expression. You're being stubborn about this. I'm being thoughtful. There's a difference. Lily, he reached across the table, took my hand. The one wearing his ring. I'm worried about you. You're pushing yourself too hard. Still having headaches, still dealing with memory issues. You don't need to add the stress of writing hundreds of thank you notes. I can handle it. Can you? His thumb traced circles on my wrist, that gesture I'd once found soothing and now made my skin crawl. Yeah, because you've seemed distracted lately, distant. Like you're somewhere else? I met his eyes, saw the calculation there. He was testing me, looking for cracks in the facade. I'm here. I'm engaged to you. I'm planning our wedding. What more do you want? I want you to be happy. I am happy. Are you? The question hung in the air. I thought about Charlotte in her apartment, practicing my handwriting, about the FBI investigation that was coming, about the evidence we were building, one careful deviation at a time. Yes, I said. I'm just tired. The accident took more out of me than I expected. He studied me for another moment before nodding. Okay, but promise me, if it gets to be too much, you'll let me help. Or Mother. Or anyone. I promise. It was a lie, and we both knew it. But Marcus accepted it with a smile and changed the subject to something about his golf game. And I let the conversation drift while I calculated how many more of these dinners I'd have to endure before everything came crashing down. Friday arrived with Charlotte and a leather portfolio. She swept into my apartment, checked that we were alone, and spread the first batch of thank you notes across my coffee table. 50 cards, each one written in my elegant script, each one containing subtle, systematic deviations that only a forensic expert would catch. These are incredible, I said, examining them one by one. They should be. I've been practicing for months. She pointed to specific examples. See here? The G in grateful has that slightly elongated tail we discussed. And the pressure on the W in Wellington is a fraction lighter than you'd naturally use. I pulled out my magnifying glass, an actual magnifying glass Charlotte had insisted I buy, and studied the details. She was right. The deviations were there, consistent across all 50 cards, subtle enough to pass casual inspection, but clear enough that an expert would notice. They're perfect, I said. They're incriminating, she corrected. Now sign them. I pulled out my fountain pen, the Mont Blanc I'd been using for all my personal correspondence, and started adding my signature to each card. Charlotte watched closely, making sure my signatures looked natural, unstressed. Good, she said after I'd signed the first 10. You're not overthinking it. Keep that energy. By the time I'd finished all 50, my hand was cramping. Charlotte gathered them carefully, slipped them into envelopes she'd already addressed in my hand, and arranged them in a neat stack. "These are ready to mail," she said, "but wait a few days, stagger them out. You're supposed to be writing them yourself. You wouldn't finish 50 in one sitting." "Right, verisimilitude." "Exactly." She pulled out her deviation map, showed me her notes. "Next batch will have slightly different patterns, same systematic deviations, but adjusted for the fact that you'd theoretically be getting tired, maybe rushing to finish. You've really thought of everything. You thought of everything. I'm just executing the plan." She met my eyes. "How are you holding up?" "I'm engaged to a man I know is going to try to kill me. My future mother-in-law is suspicious. Marcus is showing up unannounced. I'm maintaining a facade of happiness while cataloging gifts for an FBI investigation that hasn't started yet." I laughed, slightly hysterical. "I'm doing great." Charlotte sat beside me, wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "You're doing exactly what you need to do. Building evidence, creating your escape route, surviving. Some days it doesn't feel like surviving, it feels like drowning in slow motion." "I know, but you're not alone this time. You have me." I leaned into her, let myself take comfort in the solidarity. "Thank you for all of this, for remembering when I couldn't. That's what sisters are for." We sat like that for a long moment, two women who died and come back, holding on to each other while we plotted our survival. My phone buzzed. "Marcus. Dinner tonight? I want to talk about the wedding venue." I showed Charlotte the text. She grimaced. "The venue discussion, that's the one where he suggests his family's estate. I remember. Or rather, I remembered remembering it from the timeline before. Because it's traditional. Because his parents were married there. Because it would make his mother happy. And because it puts you firmly in Ashford territory, surrounded by his family, his connections, his control." Charlotte stood. "What are you going to say?" "What I said last time, that I'll think about it. And then I'll agree, because that's what the plan requires. That's what builds the narrative of coercion, of pressure, of never having real agency in this relationship." Charlotte nodded grimly. "Every choice you make that you don't want to make is evidence. Every time you give in to what Marcus wants is documentation that this relationship wasn't equal." I typed back to Marcus. "Dinner sounds good. Pick me up at 7? His response was immediate. "Perfect. I love you." I didn't respond to that, just set my phone down and looked at the stack of thank you notes, 50 pieces of evidence, 50 markers on the path to my eventual freedom. "How many more batches?" I asked Charlotte. She consulted her list. "At the current rate of gifts arriving, at least 5 more, possibly 6 if people keep sending engagement presents right up until the wedding. So 300 notes total, give or take." She gathered her materials. "But that's good. The more examples of systematic deviation, the stronger the pattern. The harder it will be for anyone to argue this was just natural variation or stress." I thought about forensic handwriting experts, FBI investigations, courtroom testimony, about the careful case we were building, one thank you note at a time. "Charlotte?" "Yeah?" "In the original timeline, when you died, did you leave a note?" Her face went carefully blank. "Yes." "What did it say?" She was quiet for a long moment. "It said I was sorry, that I'd been a terrible sister, that I wished I'd told you I loved you before it was too late." She met my eyes. It was bullshit. The note, not the sentiment. I meant every word, but the note itself was coerced. I didn't really want to die. I wanted to stop feeling guilty. Coerced by whom? By myself. By the voice in my head that said I deserved to suffer for how I'd treated you. She gripped her portfolio tighter. "Depression is a liar, Lily. It tells you that everyone would be better off without you, that your pain is permanent, and your existence is a burden. And if you listen to it long enough, it starts to sound like truth. But you came back. I came back with the knowledge that it wasn't true, that my death didn't fix anything, that it just created more pain for the people I left behind." She touched my hand. "So this time, I'm choosing survival. I'm choosing to use my second chance to save both of us." I squeezed her fingers. "We're going to make it." "We're going to make it," she echoed. She left with a promise to have the next batch ready in 2 weeks. I spent the evening staggering the mailing of the first 50 notes, to dropping them in different mailboxes across the city to avoid all of them having the same postal stamp time. Each envelope I mailed felt like a small victory, a tiny rebellion, a piece of evidence in a case that didn't exist yet, but would inevitably come to define my freedom. When Marcus picked me up for dinner, I was smiling. Not the forced smile I'd been wearing for weeks, but something real. Because for the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back. Dinner was at Marcus's favorite restaurant, a place where the waitstaff knew him by name and the wine list read like a novel. He ordered for both of us without asking, because he always ordered for both of us, and launched into his vision for the wedding. Mother thinks June would be perfect. Her gardens will be in full bloom. We could have the ceremony on the south lawn, reception in the ballroom. I listened with half my attention while mentally composing the next round of thank you notes. Charlotte would need to know about the Pattersons' crystal champagne flutes, the Morgan's donation to the Arts Foundation, the Bishop's vintage first edition of The Great Gatsby that probably cost more than my car. Don't you think? I blinked, refocused on Marcus. Sorry, what? His jaw tightened slightly. I asked if you agreed that June would be ideal. Oh, yes, June is perfect. You weren't listening. I was. I'm just tired. The headaches? You're always tired lately. He set down his wine glass with more force than necessary. And you're always having headaches. Maybe you should see your neurologist again. I have an appointment next week. Good. He reached across the table, took my hand. I'm worried about you, Lily. You're not yourself. I'm more myself than I've ever been, I thought. But aloud I said, I'm still recovering. It takes time. Of course, He paused, seemed to reconsider his words. I just want you to be happy. To be the woman I fell in love with. The woman he fell in love with had died in another timeline, but I didn't say that. I just smiled and squeezed his hand and let him steer the conversation back to wedding planning. The flowers, the music, the guest list that seemed to grow exponentially with each passing day. When he dropped me off at my apartment, he tried to come up. I deflected with another headache excuse. He accepted it with visible frustration, but kissed me goodnight with enough intensity to stake his claim. I watched his car pull away, then went upstairs to document the evening. Every conversation with Marcus went into my journal now. Date, time, what was discussed, his reactions to my boundaries. Charlotte said it might be useful later if we needed to establish a pattern of control. My phone buzzed. Charlotte. How did it go? He's getting suspicious. Pushing harder. Expected. He can sense you pulling away even if he doesn't understand why. What did you tell him? June wedding, his family's estate, everything he wanted. Good. Keep giving him what he wants until we have enough evidence to take him down. I looked at the engagement ring on my finger, caught the light, and sent fractals across my ceiling. A beautiful cage I'd chosen to enter, so knowing this time I'd find the exit. Charlotte, yeah? Thank you for not giving up on me. A long pause before her response came. Thank you for giving me a reason to stay alive. I set my phone aside and opened my laptop to the folder Charlotte had created, a master document tracking every thank you note, every deviation, every piece of evidence we were carefully constructing. 300 notes. 300 lies written in my sister's version of my hand. 300 pieces of a puzzle that would eventually spell out my freedom. I added tonight's gifts to the list, documented Marcus's behavior, and calculated that we were approximately halfway through the engagement period. 4 more months until the investigation would start. 4 more months of maintaining the facade. 4 more months until the FBI handwriting expert would notice something was wrong. I could survive 4 months. I'd already survived death. The call came on a Tuesday. I was having coffee with my mother, one of our weekly obligations that felt more like business meetings than mother-daughter bonding, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Lily Thornton? Speaking. This is Special Agent Jennifer Hayes with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your relationship with the Ashford family. The world tilted. My mother looked up from her scone, eyebrows raised in question. I turned away, lowered my voice. The Ashford family? Specifically regarding charitable donations made through the Ashford Foundation. You're engaged to Marcus Ashford. Correct? Yes, but... I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Would you be available to meet at our field office tomorrow afternoon? Say 2 o'clock? My heart hammered. This was happening too early. According to Charlotte's timeline, according to the articles from the future she'd shown me, the investigation wasn't supposed to start until March. It was only February. Yes, I can be there. Excellent. I'll send you the address. And Miss Thornton? A pause. It would be best if you didn't mention this conversation to Mr. Ashford or his family just yet. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, pulse racing. My mother was watching me with shrewd eyes. Is everything all right? Fine, just work stuff. I grabbed my bag, stood too quickly. I'm sorry, I need to go, emergency. Lily? But I was already heading for the door. Texting Charlotte with shaking hands. FBI called, meeting tomorrow, too early. What do I do? Her response came as I was climbing into a cab. My apartment, now. Charlotte was pacing when I arrived, her own phone pressed to her ear. Yes, I understand, but I need to know if there's been any change to the timeline. She looked up as I entered, held up one finger. Okay, thank you. She ended the call, turned to face me. The investigation accelerated. Why? Best guess? Someone flipped. Probably one of the Foundation's accountants. Offered to testify in exchange for immunity. I sank onto her couch, trying to process. But we're not ready. I've only sent half the thank you notes. We don't have enough evidence. We have enough. Charlotte pulled out her laptop, opened to a spreadsheet that made my head spin. 157 thank you notes have been mailed, all containing systematic deviations, all signed by you in your natural hand. That's enough to establish a pattern? But the FBI expert, they're going to want to examine the notes, compare them to my known writing samples, which is exactly what we want. She turned the laptop toward me. Remember, the point isn't to prove I wrote them. The point is to create reasonable doubt about your state of mind when you wrote them, to show that you were under duress, possibly coerced, definitely not in a position to be making clear decisions about your involvement in Marcus's activities. I stared at the spreadsheet, at the careful documentation of every note, every deviation, every piece of evidence we'd created. What if they arrest me? They won't, not yet. Right now, they're gathering information, building their case against the Ashfords. You're a witness, not a suspect. But Marcus doesn't know about the meeting. And you're not going to tell him? Charlotte sat beside me, gripped my shoulders. Listen to me. This is exactly what we planned for. Yes, it's happening earlier than expected, but the fundamentals haven't changed. You go to the meeting. You answer their questions truthfully. You cooperate fully. And when they ask about the thank you notes, you tell them you wrote them. Which is technically true, you signed them. If they notice inconsistencies in the handwriting, you express confusion. Maybe mention the head injury, the memory issues, the stress of the engagement. So I play confused victim. You are a victim. You just happen to be a victim who's also setting a trap. She squeezed my shoulders. You can do this. You've literally died and come back. An FBI interview should be easy. I laughed, slightly hysterical. Right. Easy. Lily. She waited until I met her eyes. You're going to walk into that field office tomorrow, and you're going to be honest about Marcus, about his family, about the pressure you've been under. The only thing you're not going to mention is me. Our plan. The systematic deviations. Let them discover those on their own. And if they ask directly about the handwriting, then you tell them the truth. You wrote thank you notes while recovering from a traumatic brain injury. You were stressed, overwhelmed, possibly not in your right mind. If they notice variations, you can't explain them. Because you genuinely can't. The logic was sound. I took a deep breath, tried to calm my racing heart. Okay, I can do this. You can do this, Charlotte echoed. That night, I barely slept. I kept running through potential questions, potential answers, potential traps. By the time morning arrived, I'd convinced myself a dozen times that the plan would fail, that I'd be arrested, that everything would fall apart. Charlotte showed up at noon with coffee and a pep talk. You look terrible. Thanks. I'm serious. You need to pull yourself together. The FBI is good at reading people. If you walk in there looking guilty and terrified, they're going to assume you have something to hide. I do have something to hide. No. You have something to protect. There's a difference. She thrust the coffee at me. Drink this. Shower. Don't put on something professional but not too polished. You're a confused, overwhelmed young woman who's trying to do the right thing, not a calculated conspirator. I followed her instructions like a robot. Shower, coffee, a simple dress that said trustworthy without trying too hard. Charlotte did my makeup, just enough to hide the dark circles, not enough to look like I was performing. "There," she said, stepping back to examine her work. "You look like someone who's been through hell but is trying to maintain appearances. Perfect." "Charlotte?" "Yeah. If this goes wrong, if they figure out what we did, they won't. And even if they did, you have plausible deniability. You signed the notes, yes, but I wrote them, without your knowledge, to help you during a difficult time. You're the victim in every version of this story." I wanted to argue, to insist that I wouldn't let her take the fall, but we didn't have time. I had to be at the FBI field office in 90 minutes. Charlotte walked me to the door, straightened my collar like a mother sending her child to school. "Remember, you're doing this to survive, to make sure Marcus doesn't destroy you the way he destroyed you before. Every question they ask is a step closer to freedom." "Right. Freedom." She pulled me into a fierce hug. "You've got this." I held on for a moment, drawing strength from my sister's certainty. Then I pulled back, grabbed my bag, and headed out to meet my future. The FBI field office was in downtown Manhattan, a nondescript building that I'd probably passed 1,000 times without noticing. I gave my name at security. I was escorted to an elevator, found myself in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and anxiety. Special Agent Jennifer Hayes was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail and eyes that seemed to catalog every micro-expression on my face. She stood when I entered, offered her hand. "Miss Thornton, thank you for coming in." "Of course." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Though I have to admit, I'm not sure how I can help. "Have a seat." She gestured to a chair across from her. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "Water would be great." She left briefly, returned with a bottle of water and a legal pad, settled across from me with the air of someone about to conduct surgery. "I want to start by saying that you're not under investigation. You're here as a potential witness to activities conducted by Marcus Ashford and his family's foundation." "What kind of activities?" "I'm afraid I can't get into specifics just yet. But I can tell you that we've been looking into the Ashford Foundation's financial dealings for some time. Irregularities in donation reporting, suspicious transfers, potential money laundering." I let my face register shock. It wasn't hard, even though I'd known this was coming. Hearing it stated so baldly was jarring. "Money laundering? Marcus would never— That's what we're trying to determine." She opened her legal pad, clicked her pen. "How long have you known Marcus Ashford?" "About 2 years. We've been engaged for a month." "And in that time, have you been involved in any of the foundation's activities?" "I attended some charity events, helped with fundraising for their arts program, but I wasn't involved in the financial side. That was Marcus and his father." "Did Marcus ever discuss the foundation's finances with you?" "Not in detail. He'd mention donations sometimes, or grants they were considering, but nothing that seemed—" I trailed off, let confusion show on my face. "Nothing that seemed illegal." Agent Hayes made notes. "Were you aware that some of the foundation's largest donors have connections to foreign shell corporations?" "No, I gripped my water bottle tighter. I knew some of the donors were international, but shell corporations? That sounds serious." "It is serious, particularly when those donations are being used to launder money from questionable sources." She leaned forward slightly. "Miss Thornton, I need you to be completely honest with me. Did Marcus ever ask you to sign documents you didn't fully understand? To serve as a signatory on accounts or filings?" "No, never." "What about thank you notes?" My heart stopped. I kept my face neutral through sheer force of will. "Thank you notes? For engagement gifts, wedding gifts, charitable donations made in your names." She pulled out a folder, extracted a cream-colored note card in a plastic sleeve. "We've been examining correspondence from the Ashford family. Some of it has raised questions." I stared at the note card. It was one of mine, one of Charlotte's, thanking someone named Theodore Martinson for a generous donation to the foundation. The handwriting looked perfect to me, but Agent Hayes was studying my face like she could read the truth there. "I wrote thank you notes, yes. There were a lot of them. Over 100, I think." "Did you write all of them yourself?" The question hung in the air. This was it, the moment where I could either commit to the lie or crack under pressure. I think so. I let uncertainty creep into my voice. I was recovering from a car accident, head injury. My memory of that period is fuzzy. Fuzzy how? I have gaps. Whole days I don't remember clearly. The doctors said it was normal after the kind of trauma I experienced. I touched my temple, where the scar was still visible. Sometimes I'd be writing the notes and lose track of time. Or I'd finish one and not remember starting it. Agent Hayes made more notes. Did anyone help you with the notes? Marcus offered. So did his mother. But I wanted to do them myself. It felt important, personal. What about your sister? Charlotte Thornton. Ice ran down my spine. What about her? We understand you've been spending quite a bit of time together lately, after years of being estranged. The accident brought us closer, made me realize how important family is. Did she help you with the thank you notes? I met Agent Hayes' eyes directly. No. Like I said, I wanted to do them myself. She held my gaze for a long moment, then looked down at her notepad. I'm going to be honest with you, Miss Thornton. We have a forensic document examiner looking at these notes, and she's noticed some inconsistencies. Inconsistencies? Variations in your handwriting? Small things. Pressure differences, slant variations, certain letter forms that don't match your known samples. She pulled out another note card, this one with a red arrow pointing to specific letters. So, see here? The way you cross your T in this note is slightly different from how you cross it in your signature on the bottom. And here, another arrow. The baseline waiver suggests possible stress or fatigue. I looked at the analysis, felt my hands start to shake. Charlotte had planned for this, had told me to express confusion if it came up. But seeing it laid out so clinically, having evidence of our deception pointed out by an actual expert, it made everything feel terrifyingly real. I don't understand, I said. What does that mean? It could mean several things. It could indicate you were writing under duress, or that you were in an altered mental state, or... She paused significantly. It could mean someone else wrote these notes and forged your signature. That's impossible. I wrote them. I remember writing them. Do you? Because a moment ago you said your memory of that period was fuzzy. I set down my water bottle before I could drop it. Yes, fuzzy, but I remember sitting at my desk, writing the notes, using my fountain pen. I remember my hand cramping because there were so many. What you're describing sounds like a genuine memory, but memories formed during a traumatic brain injury can be unreliable. Sometimes our brains fill in gaps with what we think should have happened rather than what actually did. Are you saying I didn't write the notes? I'm saying the handwriting analysis suggests something was off. Whether that's because you were impaired, coerced, or because someone else was involved, that's what we're trying to determine. I let tears well up, not entirely fake. I don't understand what's happening. You're asking me about Marcus, about the foundation, about thank you notes, and I feel like I'm missing something important, like everyone knows something I don't. Agent Hayes' expression softened slightly. I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to understand the seriousness of the situation. If the Foundation was engaged in illegal activities and you were used as an unwitting participant, signing documents, writing correspondence that gave legitimacy to fraudulent transactions, you need to tell me now, before this goes any further. I didn't know about any illegal activities. I swear. The tears spilled over. I just wanted to thank people for their gifts. I wanted to be a good fiancé. My voice broke. I wanted to make Marcus happy. The confession hung in the air, more true than I'd intended, because in the original timeline, that's exactly what I'd done. Written notes, smiled at parties, performed the role of perfect bride-to-be while my autonomy dissolved letter by letter. Agent Hayes pushed a box of tissues across the table. Take a minute. I know this is difficult. I wiped my eyes, tried to compose myself. Can I ask you something? Of course. Am I in trouble? She was quiet for a moment. That depends. If you cooperated knowingly in illegal activities, yes. But if you were manipulated, used without your full understanding or consent, then no. You'd be a victim, not a perpetrator. And the thank you notes, if the handwriting is wrong, if someone else wrote them, then we need to know who and why. Because those notes created a paper trail that implicated you in the Foundation's activities. So someone went to great lengths to make it look like you were a willing participant. I thought about Charlotte, practicing my handwriting for months, about the systematic deviations designed to be noticed by exactly this kind of expert, about the escape route we'd built one careful letter at a time. I need to think, I said. This is all so much, of course. But Miss Thornton, she leaned forward. If there's something you're not telling me, something you're afraid to say, now is the time. Once this investigation progresses, once charges are filed, it becomes much harder to separate victims from accomplices. I met her eyes. I've told you everything I know. If there's something wrong with the handwriting, I can't explain it. Maybe the head injury affected me more than I realized. Maybe I was more stressed than I admitted. But I didn't knowingly participate in anything illegal. What about Charlotte? Could she have— No. The word came out sharper than intended. My sister had nothing to do with this. Agent Hayes studied me for a long moment. Okay, for now I'm going to accept that. But I may need to speak with you again as the investigation continues. In the meantime, she pulled out a business card. If you remember anything, or if Marcus says something that concerns you, I want you to call me immediately, day or night. I took the card with shaking hands. Am I allowed to tell him about this meeting? That's up to you. But I'd advise caution. If Marcus is involved in illegal activities, alerting him to our investigation could jeopardize both the case and your safety. My safety? Men who are cornered can become dangerous. Especially men with resources and connections. She stood, signaling the meeting was over. Be careful, Miss Thornton. And remember, we're here to help you, not hurt you, but we can only help if you're honest with us. I left the FBI field office in a daze, Agent Hayes' card burning a hole in my pocket. Made it 2 blocks before I had to stop, lean against a building, let the reality of what had just happened crash over me. The FBI had a forensic document examiner. She'd noticed the deviations. She'd raised questions about the handwriting. Everything was going exactly according to plan. And I was terrified. I texted Charlotte from the cab. They know. They have an expert. She's noticed the inconsistencies. The response came immediately. Good. That's exactly what we wanted. Did you stick to the script? Yes. Confused victim? Memory issues? Yeah, no knowledge of illegal activities? Perfect. Now we wait. For what? For them to put the pieces together? To realize you were used, to shift their focus from you to Marcus. I looked out at the city passing by, at people going about their normal lives, oblivious to the fact that mine was hanging in the balance. What if they don't believe me? They will, because you're telling the truth. You didn't know what you were signing. You were manipulated, used, possibly coerced. The handwriting evidence supports that. Charlotte? Yeah? Thank you for doing this. For putting yourself at risk to save me. A long pause before her response. You're my sister. It's what sisters do. I closed my eyes, let the cab carry me home, and tried to believe that we were going to survive this. Both of us. Together. Marcus knew something was wrong. I could see it in the way he watched me over dinner, the way his questions probed just a little too carefully, the way his hand lingered on my wrist when I reached for my wine glass. You've been quiet lately, he said. We were at his penthouse, the city spread below us like a conquered kingdom. Distracted. Just tired. The excuse was wearing thin, but I deployed it anyway. Still dealing with headaches. You should see your doctor again. I have an appointment next week. Good. He stood, moved to the bar to refill his scotch. The motion was casual, but I caught the tension in his shoulders. I ran into Jennifer Hayes yesterday. My blood turned to ice. Who? Jennifer Hayes. FBI. She was very interested in the Foundation's operations. He turned, studied me over the rim of his glass. Did you know the FBI was investigating us? I kept my expression neutral through sheer force of will. No. Why would I? Because she mentioned speaking with you, asked if I knew whether you'd been questioned. There it was. The trap. If I lied and said no, he'd know I'd been hiding things. If I admitted the meeting, he'd want to know everything we discussed. She called me last week, I said carefully. Asked a few questions about the Foundation. I didn't think it was a big deal. What kind of questions? About charity events I'd attended, whether I knew any of the donors, basic stuff. Did she ask about the thank you notes? My heart hammered, but I maintained eye contact. She mentioned them, wanted to know if I'd written them all myself. And what did you tell her? The truth. That I wrote them while recovering from my accident. And that the period is a bit fuzzy because of the head injury. Marcus set his glass down with deliberate care. Lily, I need you to be completely honest with me right now. Did the FBI say anything about irregularities? About concerns with the foundation's finances? They mentioned they were looking into some donation patterns, but they didn't share details. And you didn't think to tell me about this? I didn't want to worry you. They said I wasn't under investigation, that I was just a witness. A witness to what? His voice had gone cold. What exactly did you witness? Nothing. That's what I told them, that I attended events, helped with fundraising, but wasn't involved in the financial operations. He crossed the room, sat beside me on the couch. Too close. His cologne overwhelming. Lily, listen to me very carefully. The foundation is under scrutiny right now. Unwarranted scrutiny from overzealous investigators who don't understand how charitable operations work. But perception matters. If the FBI thinks you're cooperating with their investigation, I am cooperating. They asked me questions. I answered truthfully. That's the problem. His hand found my knee, gripped tight enough to hurt. You don't understand the game they're playing. They'll twist your words, make innocent activities sound suspicious, make you an unwitting pawn in their agenda. Marcus, you're hurting me. He released my knee immediately, his expression shifting to contrition. I'm sorry. This is serious, Lily. More serious than you realize. And I need to know you're on my side. Of course I'm on your side. We're engaged. Are we? The question hung in the air. Because lately it feels like you're pulling away, like you're not fully present. And now I find out you've been talking to the FBI behind my back. I didn't go behind your back. They called me. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. He stood, started pacing. You could have refused to meet with them without a lawyer present. You could have called me immediately. You could have... He stopped, turned to face me. You could have trusted me. The irony wasn't lost on me. This man, who would eventually let me die rather than face consequences for his crimes, was asking me to trust him. I do trust you, I lied. Then prove it. Tell me everything you told the FBI. Every word. Every question they asked. I recounted the meeting as accurately as I could, leaving out only the parts about the handwriting analysis being designed to create reasonable doubt about my state of mind. Marcus listened intently, his expression darkening. They have a forensic examiner looking at the thank you notes, he said when I finished. That's not standard procedure for a financial investigation. Maybe they're being thorough. Or maybe they suspect forgery, falsification of documents. He met my eyes. Did they accuse you of forging the notes? No. They asked if someone else might have written them. Who? They mentioned you, your mother, Charlotte. His jaw tightened at my sister's name. Charlotte? Of course. She's been suspiciously helpful lately, hasn't she? After years of barely speaking to you. The accident brought us together. I told you that. Yes, you did. And I thought it was sweet. Well, this newfound sisterly bond. But now I'm wondering if there's more to it. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something. Charlotte has a record, did you know that? Minor stuff from her college years. Forgery, actually. She wrote papers for other students, sold them for cash, got caught, got expelled, got a sealed record because Daddy made it go away. I hadn't known that. Charlotte had never mentioned it, but I kept my face neutral. That was 10 years ago. Patterns, Lily. People don't change. They just get better at hiding their true nature. He sat back down, took both my hands. I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to tell the FBI that Charlotte helped you with the thank you notes, that she practiced your handwriting, wrote some of them when you were too tired or overwhelmed. So that any inconsistencies in the writing are because of her involvement, not because of anything I did. My blood turned to ice. What? It's a simple explanation. You were recovering from a head injury. Your sister offered to help. She's good at mimicry. She always has been. She wrote some notes in your hand to lighten your load. There's nothing criminal about that. But that's not what happened. Isn't it? His eyes bored into mine. You said yourself that your memory of that period is fuzzy, that you have gaps. How do you know Charlotte didn't help? How can you be sure? Because I stopped, uncertain. This was the trap Charlotte had warned me about, the moment when my fabricated confusion would be weaponized against me. You can't be sure, Marcus said gently, and that's okay. So the important thing is to give the FBI a plausible explanation for the handwriting inconsistencies, one that doesn't implicate either of us in any wrongdoing. You want me to throw Charlotte under the bus? I want you to tell the truth. If she helped you, that's not a crime. It's a kindness, but the FBI needs to know so they can understand why the handwriting varies. I pulled my hands free. I can't do that. Why not? Because it's not true. And because Charlotte doesn't deserve to be dragged into this. She's already in it, Lily. The FBI mentioned her by name. They're going to question her. Better she have a story that makes sense than to let them speculate about why she's suddenly so involved in your life. He was manipulating me. I could see it clearly now. The way he framed Charlotte's potential involvement as protection rather than accusation. The way he made betraying my sister sound like loyalty to the truth. This was what he'd done in the original timeline. Twisted my thoughts until I couldn't tell right from wrong, truth from lie, protection from prison. No, I said firmly. I'm not telling the FBI that Charlotte wrote the notes, because she didn't. Marcus's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Is it? Because when the FBI decides those notes are evidence of fraud, when they start looking at who had motive and opportunity to forge your handwriting, Charlotte is going to be at the top of their list. And you'll have to live with knowing you could have protected her with the truth. The emotional manipulation was textbook. Create guilt, offer absolution, frame betrayal as salvation. I'd seen him do it before. Would see him do it again if I let this continue. I need to go, I said, standing. Lily, I need space to think, to process all of this. His hand shot out, grabbed my wrist. Not painfully, but firmly. A warning. Don't make any decisions without talking to me first, please. I met his eyes, saw the calculation there, the assessment of how hard he could push before I broke. I won't. He released me slowly. I love you. I'm trying to protect you. Both of us. I know. I left his penthouse with shaking hands and a heart full of dread. Texted Charlotte from the elevator. We need to talk. Now. She was waiting at my apartment when I arrived, her face pale. He knows. He suspects. Tried to get me to tell the FBI you helped with the notes. Fuck. She started pacing. This is happening faster than I expected. He's already trying to position me as the fall guy. I didn't agree. I told him you didn't help. Which just makes him more suspicious about what we're actually doing. She pulled out her phone, showed me a text from an unknown number. Your sister is making a mistake protecting you. When this falls apart, you'll both regret it. Is that from Marcus? Burner phone, but yes. She deleted the text. He's rattled, which means he's dangerous. I thought about his hand on my wrist, the cold calculation in his eyes. What do we do? We stick to the plan. You maintain innocence. I maintain that I had nothing to do with the notes, and we let the FBI's investigation play out. But Marcus can't prove anything. The only people who know the truth are you and me. And we're not telling. She gripped my shoulders. Listen to me. We're so close. The FBI has noticed the discrepancies. They're building a case against the Ashfords. All we have to do is hold on. And if Marcus tries to hurt us, to silence us, he won't, because he's too smart for that. Violence leaves evidence. And right now, he can't afford any more scrutiny. She met my eyes. We're going to survive this. Both of us. I wanted to believe her, but that night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the memory of Marcus's face when I refused to betray Charlotte. The coldness there, the promise of consequences. My phone buzzed. A text from Agent Hayes. Need to speak with you again. Tomorrow, if possible. More questions about the notes. And then, minutes later, another text. Marcus. I love you. I'm sorry I pushed. Let's talk tomorrow. Please. 2 messages. 2 very different futures hanging in the balance. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, but all I could see was that tree on the dark road, the inevitability of impact, the terrible certainty that this time, like last time, I was running out of ways to escape.
Like an A minor. Beautiful. Beautiful chord. Versatile. E minor 7. Gorgeous. Love that. Love that. Really nice. D's nuts. The parachute chord. Good. Kiss me. Great song. Love that, Star Kid. Learn a tune next. That's so scary because there's people in here who are actual musicians, and that's scary. That's scary. C major 7, C7. Ah, is that the Sixpence None the Richer? Is that the combination? Is that the combination? Ah, well there you go. Maybe I'll learn that, huh? C major 7. What's that look like? Co-stream with Kenda. Wait, that would be so cute. That would actually be really cute. Also, people in here, like me, to lower the average musical talent. Hey, let go. Fish. D&B with acoustic guitar. LK by DJ Marky. I'm going to have to look that up. Thanks, Fish. LK. DJ Marky. Alrighty. Carolina Bella. Okay, or featuring Stamina MC? Which one? Which version? Aww. Don't let my bachelor's degree in music composition scare you. Crazy. C major 7, C, E, G, B. Oh.